and we are learning section 3.5 and revisiting section 3.5, which is all about graphing linear equations in slope-intercept form. So again, the slope is the steepness of a line. We already know this. We already took a quiz on how to find it from a graph, from a table, from an equation. And slope also refers to the rate at which the y values are changing in respect to x. That means the steepness. How steep is the change? That's the rate of change. And for linear equations, the rate of change is always the same, which is why you always get a straight line. Straight lines mean that the rate of change is equal no matter where you're looking at on the graph. If you are given 2 points like x1, y1 and x2, y2, you can use this formula here to find the slope. They use the variable m to represent slope. I'm not really sure why, but they do. And the slope formulas, oh, God, a bug just flew in my ear. That was so weird. The slope m formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And when you subtract the y's, that is the difference, and that represents the rise, which is how much you go up or down. And when you subtract the x's, that difference represents how much you go left or right. That's the run. So there's 4 different types of slopes that we see in Algebra 1, and we can see positive slopes, negative slopes, slopes of 0, and undefined slopes. So positive slopes are when the line increases from left to right. So we always read the graph from left to right, and if it's going up, that means it's a positive slope. If the line is going down, that means it is a negative slope. It's right there. It's just a fly, but it might go in your ear. If it is a flat line, that means the slope is 0. And if it is a vertical line, that means it's an undefined slope. So let's do some examples with actually finding the slope of the line. So these 3 examples have graphs, and they show the points that they want you to use, and they want you to find the slope. First, they want you to describe the slope, and then they want you to find it. Describing it means what type of slope is it? Looking at number 1, would this be a positive, negative, 0, or undefined slope? Negative. Yes, this is a negative slope because you can see that it's going down. From left to right, it's decreasing. So I know when I find the slope, it's going to be a negative number. There's 2 ways to find the slope of a line. One way to find the slope of the line is use the formula y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So you can use the 2 points here, negative 4, 3, and 1, 1, and find the slope using the formula. So the formula says take the 2 y numbers and subtract them. Well, first thing we might want to do is label what these numbers are. This is the first x and first y that I wrote down. This is the second x and second y that I wrote down. So this is x2 and y2. So when I go to insert these numbers, it kind of looks like an x. When I go to insert these numbers into the formula, I will be doing 1, since that's y2, minus y1, which is 3. And I'll be dividing that by x2, which is 1, minus x1, which is negative 4. Once I have that, it's time for me to simplify. 1 minus 3 is negative 2. 1 minus negative 4 really is 1 plus 4, which is 5. So the slope of my line here is negative 2/5. Slopes are always going to be fractions. You're going to want to make sure your slopes are simplified, and this is simplified. It's okay that it's negative because we thought it would be a negative number. And if you ever get a slope that is an improper fraction, meaning like the number on the top is larger than the number on the bottom, that again is okay. Every slope is going to be a fraction of some sort. You just are going to want to simplify it if possible. That's one way to find the slope of a line given a graph. The next way to find the slope is to start here at the point all the way to the left and try to get to the point all the way to the right. So I'm going to start here at this point. What you do when you're finding the slope from a graph, instead of using the formula, is you're finding how much you have to rise versus how much you have to run. To get from the starting point to the ending point, we don't actually have to go up. We have to go down. So because of that, that means that we will be going down, which is representing a negative direction. I have to go down 1, 2 units to get to be on the same line as that point. Going down 2 units represents a -2 movement for your rise. So the rise is going to be -2, meaning that you go down. And then now that we're on the same line as that point, now I have to go over to the right 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. Going to the right is a +5 movement, meaning the run is just 5. So altogether, the rise over run would be -2/5, which is the slope of this line. What I want you to do, please, is take a couple minutes, pick whichever method makes more sense to you. I think counting and finding the slope that way is quicker, but you might like to use the formula better because maybe that makes the most sense to you. It doesn't matter as long as one method makes sense. Please take the next couple of minutes to complete numbers 2 and 3, describing the slope and then finding the slope. Yeah. Here, you can have this one.
Are these ones x1 and y1? Like up here?
So it doesn't matter actually. You can pick whichever one you want to be the first. right, let's go over these two answers here. So number 2, there's 2 ways to do this. You can either use the formula or you can use just counting on the graph to get to your answer. I know by looking at this is going to be a positive slope, meaning that the answer, the number that we get for the slope, will be a positive number because the line is increasing from left to right. I think the quicker way to find slope is actually using the rise over run method, which means start at the left point and go to end at the right point by just counting how much you have to go up and over or down and over. Because this is positive, we have to go up and over, and we have to go up 1, 2, 3, 4 units. That's a positive 4 rise. So for my rise, I know that that's going to be a positive 4. And then I will have to run, meaning go to the right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units to the right to get to the end point. That means the slope of this line is 4/6. I can simplify that by dividing everything by 2. The final slope is 2/3. Another way to find the slope is by using the 2 ordered pairs, -3, -1, and 3, 3, and using the formula. The formula says take the second y and subtract the first y. 3 minus -1 over, take the second x and subtract the first x. 3 minus -3. Well, 3 minus -1 is 3 plus 1, which is 4. 3 minus -3 is really 3 plus 3, which is 6. 4/6 is the same thing as 2/3. It's just simplified as 2/3. And then the last one is another positive line. I know my answer will be a positive slope because the line is increasing from left to right. My first class, I started to do this problem and I was counting and I realized that this graph is not going by 1s like the rest of them. If you look closely, it's actually going by 2s, which makes counting on the graph very confusing. So instead, I'm going to use the 2 ordered pairs here, 2, -3, and 5, 4, and find the slope just using the formula because even I get confused with doing the counting part, rise over run, unless they're going by 1s. So using the formula, I will do 4 minus -3 over 5 minus 2. 4 minus -3 is 4 plus 3, which is 7. 5 minus 2 is 3. The slope of this is 7/3. I know in pre-algebra classes, your teachers would tell you you cannot leave an answer in an improper fraction form. In this section, it is totally fine to leave an answer like this. I would not want the answer in a mixed number because slope is telling you how much to go up and over or down and over. It wouldn't make sense to have it in a mixed number. Okay, so that is a recap on how to find slope. If you flip this over to the next page, please, we are going to be finding slope from a table. So there are 2 methods to find the slope from a table. And one method is just kind of like the graph method when you count. One method is to count and see the difference, is find the slope. Another method is to use the formula using 2 points. Let's first use the slope, the counting method from the table to find the slope. That means what you're doing is you're looking at each x value and seeing what happens and how to get from one number to the next. To get from 4 to 7, I would add 3. What would I do to get from 7 to 10?
+3.
Yep, another +3. And what about 10 to 13? +3. You notice here that you keep adding 3 each time to get to the next number. That doesn't mean the slope is 3. The slope is the rise over the run. It's the change in y over the change in x. Let's see what happens to y. How do you get from 20 to 14?
-6.
Yes, -6. How about 14 to 8? -6 again. And then 8 to 2, -6 again. To find the slope from a table, you look at the change in x and the change in y. The rise over run formula, which is slope, the slope is equal to the rise over run, which is also equal to the change in y over the change in x. So each y value is changing by going down 6. That means it's being represented by a -6 change, divided by each x value is changing by 3, which means the slope of this table is -6/3, which simplifies to be -2 or -2/1, depending on how you would like to answer that question. Using the table, you can count the change in x and the change in y, but then you have to make sure you put it in correctly, that it's the y number divided by the x number. So that's one way to find slope. The next way to find slope from the table is to choose any 2 ordered pairs from the table. You could choose the first one and the second one. You could choose the first one and third one, second and fourth. It does not matter. I'll choose these 2 ordered pairs here, the first and second, and then I will use the formula, and I'm sure my slope will come out to be the same thing. The formula says take the second y, which is 14, and subtract the first y, which is 20, divide that by the second x, which is 7, and subtract the first x, which is 4. So 14 minus 20 is -6, and 7 minus 4 is 3. We get the same exact answer using the formula. We get -6/3, which still simplifies to be -2. So what I want you to do, please, is choose a method that makes the most sense to you. You can either just count from the table and find the slope by finding the change in y divided by the change in x, or pick 2 points from the table and find the slope that way. I'll give you a couple minutes and then we'll go over the answers. Yeah,
For this one, it doesn't change.
I know. So something weird
Oh,
happens.
it's 0. Just 2.
Yep, and then to find the final slope, what you do is you divide 0 by 2. 0 divided by 2 is just 0, meaning that the slope is 0.
Just 0.
Yeah.
This one is so confusing. Because 0 is 6, but then this is plus 3, and then that's plus 6, and that's plus 3.
Right, so for this one, the change in all of these is 0, and this is all over the place. Well, what happens with this one, whenever you find the slope from the table, you divide this number by the change in this number. So it's 6 divided by 0, 6 divided by 0, 3 divided by 0. Well, when you divide by 0, put in your calculator. Do 6 divided by 0. Tell me what you get.
So much. It says error.
Right.
Divide by 0.
That means that it's undefined. All right, let's go over these 2 answers. I will show you both methods in finding the slope of the line from the table. So it's important to understand at least one method. The easier of the 2, I think, is just counting and looking at the increase in x and the increase or decrease in y, and then coming up with the slope from there. To get from -1 to 1, we add 2. To get from 1 to 3, we add 2. To get from 3 to 5, we add 2. To get from 2 to 2, we add 0. To get from 2 to 2, we add 0. To get from 2 to 2, we add 0. It's very important that you understand what to do from here or you will get the answer wrong. The answer, the slope of this, is going to be the change in y. The change in y is here, divided by the change in x, which is here. Oh, I didn't mean to write x, I meant to write 2. The change in x. Your slope is your rise over run. Rise represents y, run represents x. So when you're finding the slope from the table, if you're using the counting method, once you get all of these numbers, you then have to divide them the correct way. 0 divided by 2 really just equals 0, which means the slope of this line is 0. That means it's a horizontal line. If you look at these points, -1, 2 would be right here. 1, 2 would be right here. 3, 2 would be right here. You can see that these points form a horizontal line, which makes sense that we got 0 as our slope. Something interesting also happens in the third one. To get from -3 to -3, we add 0. To get from -3 to -3, we add 0. To get from -3 to -3, we add 0. To get from -3 to 0, we add 3. To get from 0 to 6, we add 6. To get from 6 to 9, we add 3. So when I go to find this slope, I end up doing like 3 divided by 0 or 6 divided by 0. And whenever you divide by 0 in your calculator will tell you there's a divide by 0 error. That means the slope of this line is undefined. Undefined slopes are slopes that are vertical lines. If you look at these points, -3 is here. -3, 0 is here. -3, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is here. You can see that these points all create a vertical line, and vertical lines have undefined slopes. The last thing for today is just a recap on slope-intercept form. We did take a quiz on this. We should already know what this form looks like and how to use it. But a linear equation can be written in the form y equals mx plus b, where the slope of the line is the variable m and b is the y-intercept. So in number 6, 7, and 8, they're asking us to find the slope and y-intercept of the graph of the linear equation. Yes?
We just cross it off and solve for the other area.
That's for x and y-intercepts. This one's a little bit different. To find the slope and y-intercept of these equations, we need to first put all of them into slope-intercept form. This one already is in slope-intercept form because if you notice, slope-intercept form starts with y equals. Number 6 already has it in y equals form. The slope is the number in front of x. What is the slope of this equation? The slope is the number in front of x. What is the slope of the first equation? Yes. This number right here, -6, is the slope. That means the slope is -6 or -6 over 1. What is the y-intercept of this equation? The y-intercept is the plain number. 1. This is the y-intercept. This is where the equation crosses the y-axis. The y-intercept can also be interpreted as an ordered pair. The ordered pair of this is 0, 1, because when you're on the y-axis, you have 0 as your x number. So in number 7, it wants you to state the slope and y-intercept. This one's a little bit different, so I want you to try this one. And number 8 is way different because this one is not currently in slope-intercept form. To take an equation and put it into slope-intercept form, you have to solve it for y first. So number 7, work on that. Number 8, work on that. And then we will go over it and call it a day.
scale.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, help me. I did this one and it's like I got negative 14 for the y. What would I do?
So you can't subtract 4 from that because it's attached to the y. You can subtract x from both sides though.
But wouldn't it be the same?
No, you can subtract x. It would just be 4y equals negative 10 minus x. This is why pencils are the best thing to use.
Yeah. I'm just like confused. Because like what? It's x. Like,
Well, you're solving for y.
would it take away the y?
You don't take away the y because that's what you're solving for. You leave the y where it's at and you move everything else to the other side.
But like, how would that get us like the slope?
I'm going to show you in a minute.
All right, number 7. Number 7 just says y equals 8. It doesn't actually give us anything with x at all, and we know that the slope is the number in front of x. Because there's no x at all, we have to assume the slope is 0. We should already know that the slope is 0 because y equals 8 is a graph that at 8 on the y-intercept, it would be a horizontal line like this. So we already should know that the slope is 0, but the slope is 0 since there is no x value. And I know the y-intercept is the constant number, which in this case is 8. The last problem here is a little bit interesting because it's not currently in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is solved for y. So what we need to do is take this equation, circle the y, and solve for it. That means we need to move everything that is on the same side as the y or attached to the y to the other side. The first thing you're going to want to do is move the x number. To move it, you're going to do the opposite of what's currently happening. It's a positive x. So to move it to the other side, we will subtract both sides by x. We're left with 4 times y equals, and then it's important to realize that slope-intercept form has the number with x first. So I'm going to write negative x first and then the minus 10 second. And I'm doing that instead of negative 10 minus x because then it will already be in the correct form. Now remember, we cannot combine negative x and negative 10 together because they're not like terms, so it would just be negative x minus 10. Then the last thing we will do is divide everything by 4, and we will get the equation y equals, and then this is a negative 1x over 4, that means this is a negative 1/4 x, and then negative 10 divided by 4 is not going to be a whole number, it's going to be a fraction or decimal still. Negative 10 divided by 4 is the same thing as negative 5 divided by 2, which is like negative 2.5 or negative 2.5. So that is all for today's lesson.